The morning mist hung heavy over Heathrow Airport as Sergeant James Mitchell adjusted his crisp uniform and checked his watch. 23 years of service in the Royal Protection Unit had taught him to notice every detail, every unusual movement. Every person who didn't quite belong today felt different, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. The private terminal buzzed with its usual controlled chaos. Diplomatic pouches were being loaded, security sweeps conducted, and protocols followed with military precision. But something in the air felt charged, electric with tension that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. His radio crackled to life. "Mitchell, we have a situation developing at Gate 7. Queen Consort's departure has been complicated." James frowned as he made his way through the corridors he knew by heart. Camilla's trips were usually routine affairs, meticulously planned months in advance with every security detail worked out to the minute. What could possibly be complicated about a standard diplomatic visit? As he approached Gate 7, he could see the unmistakable signs of controlled panic. Security personnel moved with purpose but without their usual calm confidence. Protocol officers whispered urgently into their phones, and the air hummed with barely contained anxiety. "What's the situation?" James asked his colleague, Inspector Sarah Chen, who had been overseeing the departure preparations. Sarah's usually composed face showed cracks of concern. "We received intelligence about 30 minutes ago. Nothing specific, just concerns about the trip. Higher-ups want everything double-checked before departure." James nodded, understanding the weight of such vague warnings. In their line of work, concerns could mean anything from terrorist threats to diplomatic incidents that could reshape international relations. The safety of the royal family was never left to chance. The Queen Consort's motorcade had arrived precisely on schedule, as royal protocol demanded. Camilla emerged from the armored Bentley with her characteristic grace, seemingly unbothered by the additional security measures that had been quietly put in place. Her lady-in-waiting, Margaret Thornton, followed closely behind, overseeing the careful handling of the royal luggage. James watched as the standard security procedures began. Every bag, every item, every piece of documentation would be examined with microscopic attention to detail. It was routine, but today it felt different. Today, something was making everyone nervous. The luggage inspection area had been cordoned off, creating a sterile environment where trained specialists could work without interruption. James observed as they began their methodical examination of each piece: designer suitcases, diplomatic pouches, personal effects, everything that would accompany the Queen Consort on what was supposed to be a straightforward visit to strengthen Commonwealth ties. But as the first suitcase was opened, James noticed something odd. The inspector's hands paused, hovering over the contents with an expression James had never seen before. It wasn't confusion exactly, but something deeper, a kind of recognition that seemed to drain the color from the man's face. "Sir," the inspector called quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "You need to see this." James approached, his trained eyes immediately scanning for threats, for anything that could endanger the royal family or compromise national security. What he saw made him stop in his tracks. Nestled between carefully folded silk scarves and designer clothing was a small, leather-bound journal. It looked innocuous enough, the kind of diary any traveler might keep, but there was something about the way it was hidden, wrapped in a silk scarf as if someone had taken great care to keep it concealed, that set off every alarm bell in James's head. "Have you opened it?" he asked, though he already knew the answer from the inspector's pale complexion. "Just the first page, sir, I think. I think you should call this in before we go any further." James felt the weight of decision settling on his shoulders. In 23 years of service, he had never had to make a call like this, never had to consider the possibility that a member of the royal family might be carrying something that could compromise their safety or the security of the nation. His hand moved to his radio, but he paused. Once he made this call, there would be no going back. The departure would be delayed, questions would be asked, and depending on what that journal contained, the consequences could ripple through the highest levels of government. The Queen Consort stood in the VIP lounge, chatting pleasantly with her staff, completely unaware that her departure had been quietly suspended. She checked her watch with the mild impatience of someone accustomed to precise scheduling, but showed no signs of concern about the slight delay. James made his decision. Control. This is Mitchell. We have a code yellow situation at Gate 7. Request immediate supervisor presence for baggage inspection irregularity. The words felt heavy as they left his mouth. Code yellow meant potential security concern. Not immediate danger, but something that required higher-level decision-making. Within minutes, the terminal would be swarming with additional security personnel, and the Queen Consort's trip would be officially on hold. As they waited for backup to arrive, James found himself studying Camilla through the glass partition. She appeared completely relaxed, discussing something with Margaret Thornton while occasionally glancing toward the departure board. There was nothing in her demeanor to suggest she knew about the journal, nothing to indicate she had any idea what was about to unfold. The leather journal sat on the inspection table like a small bomb, its secrets still hidden but its very presence enough to stop a royal departure in its tracks. James had seen intelligence reports, diplomatic cables, and classified documents that could reshape international relations. But he had never seen anything that made his hands shake quite like this innocuous-looking diary. "Sir," the inspector said quietly, "there's something else." James turned back to the inspection table, where the man was pointing to a small compartment built into the bottom of the suitcase. It was expertly concealed, the kind of hidden space that would be invisible to casual inspection, but obvious to trained security personnel. "Have you opened it?" "No, sir." Waiting for authorization, James nodded, his mind racing through protocols and procedures. Hidden compartments in royal luggage were unprecedented in his experience. They suggested either a security breach of the highest order, or something even more complicated, the possibility that the Queen Consort herself was involved in something she shouldn't be. The sound of approaching footsteps announced the arrival of his supervisor, Commander Patricia Hayes. James had worked with Patricia for over a decade, and he could read her expressions better than most people could read a book. Right now, she looked like someone who had just been handed the most complicated problem of her career. "Brief me," she said simply, her eyes already taking in the scene, the suspended departure, the inspection table, and the journal that seemed to command everyone's attention despite its modest appearance. As James explained the situation, he watched Patricia's face go through the same transformation he had witnessed in the inspector. Professional concern giving way to something deeper, more troubling. When he mentioned the hidden compartment, her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Has anyone informed Her Majesty of the delay?" "Not yet, ma'am. We've kept it low-key so far." Patricia nodded, understanding the delicate balance they were trying to maintain. Royal protocol demanded that any delays be explained and authorized at the highest levels, but security concerns required them to act first and explain later. "Open the compartment," she ordered. The inspector's hands worked carefully, his training evident in every movement. Hidden compartments could contain anything from emergency communication devices to items that posed security risks. As the false bottom lifted away, James found himself holding his breath. Inside were photographs. Old photographs. By the look of them, though well preserved, the inspector lifted them carefully, and James could see they showed people in what appeared to be informal settings. Nothing that immediately screamed security risk, but their very presence in a hidden compartment suggested they were significant in ways that weren't immediately obvious. "We need to make a decision," Patricia said quietly. "Either we clear this luggage and allow the departure to proceed, or we escalate this to levels I'm not sure any of us are prepared for." James understood the weight of her words. Escalating a security concern involving the Queen Consort would involve MI5, possibly MI6, and definitely the Prime Minister's office. It would turn what was supposed to be a routine diplomatic trip into a potential international incident. But looking at that journal, at those carefully hidden photographs, at the expression on his supervisor's face, James knew they had already crossed the line where routine security procedures would suffice. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "I think we need to make that call." Patricia's nod was almost imperceptible, but it carried the weight of a decision that would change everything. Within the hour, the Queen Consort's planned departure would become a full-scale security investigation, and none of them had any idea where it would lead. The terminal continued its normal operations around them, passengers boarding flights, families saying goodbyes, business travelers checking emails. But in the secured area of Gate 7, time seemed to have stopped. The journal remained unopened, the photographs unexamined, and the Queen Consort waited in the VIP lounge, still unaware that her carefully planned trip had just become the center of a security storm that would test every protocol in the book. James checked his watch again and realized that in 23 years of service, he had never felt the weight of duty quite like this. Whatever was in that journal, whatever those photographs showed, and whatever the Queen Consort was carrying in her luggage, it was about to change everything they thought they knew about royal security. The call was about to be made, and there would be no going back. Commander Patricia Hayes made the call that would summon forces far beyond anything Sergeant James Mitchell had ever witnessed in his career. Within 20 minutes of her encrypted communication, the private terminal at Heathrow began filling with people who didn't advertise their presence, but whose authority was unmistakable. The first to arrive was Detective Chief Inspector William Ashworth from SO 15, the Counter-Terrorism Command. James recognized the type immediately: calm, methodical, and possessed of the kind of quiet intensity that came from dealing with threats to national security on a daily basis. Behind him came two people James didn't recognize but whose bearing suggested they operated at levels where names and departments weren't shared casually. "Where is she now?" Ashworth asked without preamble, his eyes already scanning the secured area where the Queen Consort's luggage remained under guard. "VIP Lounge Alpha," Patricia replied. "She's been informed there's a minor technical delay with the aircraft. No indication she's aware of the inspection." James watched as one of the unidentified officials, a woman with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she was accustomed to handling impossible situations, opened the leather journal for the first time. Her face revealed nothing, but James noticed her posture change as she read. Whatever was written on those pages, it was significant enough to make someone who probably briefed the Prime Minister on national security matters look genuinely concerned. "We need a secure room," the woman said quietly, "and we need to speak with Her Majesty immediately." The weight of those words settled over everyone present. In James's experience, when security officials needed to speak with members of the royal family immediately, it usually meant either imminent physical danger or a situation that could destabilize the government. Given that Camilla was currently safe inside one of the most secure buildings in Britain, he was beginning to suspect it was the latter. As they prepared a secure conference room, James caught sight of the photographs that had been hidden in the false compartment. From his angle, he could only see pieces. What looked like people in casual conversation, outdoor settings that could have been anywhere, faces he didn't recognize but which seemed to command attention even in decades-old prints. "Sergeant Mitchell," Ashworth called him over. "You've been with the Royal Protection Unit for how long?" 23 years, sir." "In that time, have you ever encountered anything like this? Any indication that members of the royal family might be carrying materials of sensitive nature without proper security clearance?" James considered the question carefully. In his experience, royal luggage was packed by staff who understood security requirements implicitly. Every item was logged, every document cleared through proper channels. The idea that someone might pack a hidden journal and photographs without following protocol was almost unthinkable. "No, sir. Never anything like this." Ashworth nodded as if confirming something he already suspected. "What about the Queen Consort's recent behavior? Any changes in routine, unusual meetings, travel requests outside normal channels?" James found himself thinking back over the past several weeks. Camilla's schedule had been typical. Charity engagements, official functions, the usual round of duties that came with her position. But now that he was looking for anomalies, he realized there had been a few instances that seemed slightly off. "There were some private meetings," he said slowly. "Who attended these meetings?" "I don't have access to those records, sir. That would be handled by the private secretary's office." Ashworth made a note, but James could see the wheels turning behind his eyes. Whatever they had found in that luggage was painting a picture that extended beyond a simple security oversight. The secure conference room had been prepared with the kind of efficiency that spoke of well-practiced protocols: signals intelligence equipment to prevent electronic surveillance, white noise generators to defeat listening devices, and communication links to the highest levels of government. James had seen similar setups before, but never for a conversation involving a member of the royal family. Through the glass partition, he could see Camilla being escorted from the VIP lounge by her lady-in-waiting and 2 protection officers. Her expression showed mild puzzlement but no real concern. She moved with her characteristic poise, seemingly unaware that she was about to walk into the most serious security interview of her life. "Mitchell," Commander Hayes called him aside. "I want you to observe the interview. Your knowledge of royal protocol and the Queen Consort's normal behavior patterns may be crucial in assessing her responses." James nodded, understanding the gravity of what he was being asked to do. He would be watching for signs that Camilla was being deceptive, that she was involved in something beyond what appeared in the official record. It was a responsibility that sat heavily on his shoulders. The unidentified woman, who had introduced herself only as Miss Crawford, had arranged the journal and photographs on the conference table with the precision of someone building a legal case. James could see that the journal was open to a page covered in handwritten text, though he couldn't make out the words from his position. When Camilla entered the room, her eyes immediately went to the items on the table. James watched her face carefully, looking for any sign of recognition, any hint that she knew what was about to unfold. What he saw instead was genuine confusion, followed quickly by what appeared to be growing alarm. "Your Majesty," Miss Crawford began, her tone respectful but unmistakably serious, "we need to discuss some items that were found in your luggage during routine security screening." Camilla's eyes moved from the journal to the photographs and back again. James had spent enough time around the royal family to recognize when they were genuinely surprised versus when they were managing a situation diplomatically. This appeared to be genuine surprise. "I'm not sure I understand," Camilla said, her voice carrying the kind of controlled confusion that came from years of public life. "Those items, I've never seen them before." Miss Crawford opened the journal to a specific page and turned it so Camilla could see clearly. "This appears to be a detailed account of private conversations involving members of the royal family. Conversations that, according to the dates listed, should have been protected by official secrecy protocols." James watched as Camilla leaned forward to read, her expression shifting from confusion to what looked like growing horror. Whatever was written on that page, it was clearly not something she had expected to see, and definitely not something she had written herself. "This isn't. I would never," she began, then stopped, seeming to realize that anything she said would be recorded and analyzed by intelligence professionals. "Your Majesty," Detective Chief Inspector Ashworth interjected gently, "we understand this is distressing, but we need to determine how these materials came to be in your possession and whether their presence represents a security threat to the Crown or to national interests." Camilla sat back in her chair, and James could see her drawing on decades of training in handling difficult situations. When she spoke again, her voice was steady but carrying an undertone of something that sounded almost like fear. "I packed my luggage myself yesterday evening. These items were not among my possessions. I can provide you with a complete inventory of everything I intended to bring on this trip." Miss Crawford made a note, but her expression remained skeptical. "Your Majesty, the items were found in a concealed compartment built into the bottom of your primary suitcase. This compartment would not be visible to casual inspection." "Then someone has tampered with my luggage," Camilla replied with growing firmness. "I assure you, I had no knowledge of any concealed compartment, and I certainly had no knowledge of these materials." James found himself believing her. In his experience, members of the royal family were skilled at managing public relations disasters, but they were also fundamentally honest when dealing with security matters. The Crown's survival depended on trust between the royal family and the security services, and that trust was never compromised lightly. But if Camilla was telling the truth, it raised even more disturbing questions. Who had access to her luggage? Who could have planted materials without her knowledge? And most importantly, what was the purpose of putting her in possession of information that could potentially damage the monarchy? Miss Crawford lifted one of the photographs and placed it where Camilla could see it clearly. "Do you recognize any of the people in this image?" Camilla studied the photograph carefully, and James saw her expression change again. This time, It was recognition mixed with something that looked like dread. "Yes," she said quietly. That's a photograph from a private gathering several months ago. But I have no idea how someone obtained this image, or why it would be in my luggage. Who else was present at this gathering?" Camilla glanced around the room, seeming to weigh her words carefully. It was a private dinner party. The guest list included several people who would prefer their attendance remain confidential. James felt the temperature in the room seem to drop. Private gatherings involving the royal family were always carefully documented for security purposes. If there had been attendees whose presence was sensitive enough to require confidentiality, that information should have been shared with the protection services. "Your Majesty," Ashworth said, his tone becoming more formal. "I need to inform you that this luggage inspection has become a formal security investigation. We'll need to examine your recent schedule, your contacts, and any private meetings that may not have been reported through official channels." Camilla nodded, but James could see the weight of realization settling on her shoulders. This was no longer a simple matter of explaining suspicious items in her luggage. This had become an investigation into her private life, her relationships, and potentially her loyalty to the crown. "There's something else, Miss," Crawford said, opening the journal to another page. This entry appears to describe a conversation about government policy decisions before they were made public, decisions that could have significant impact on financial markets. The implications of that statement hit everyone in the room simultaneously. If someone had been using access to the royal family to obtain advance information about government decisions, it could constitute everything from insider trading to espionage. James watched Camilla's face as she processed what was being suggested. For the first time since the interview began, she looked genuinely shaken. "I need to speak with my private secretary," she said quietly. "And I believe I need legal representation." "Miss," Crawford nodded as if she had been expecting this moment. "Your Majesty, at this time, you're not under arrest or formal suspicion. However, given the nature of the materials found in your possession, we'll need to postpone your departure indefinitely while we conduct our investigation." The room fell silent, except for the hum of the electronic countermeasures. James realized he was witnessing a moment that could potentially reshape the monarchy. Whether Camilla was innocent or involved, the very fact that these materials had been found in her luggage would send shockwaves through the highest levels of government. As they prepared to escort the Queen Consort to more permanent quarters, where she could consult with advisors and legal counsel, James caught sight of the journal one more time. Whatever secrets it contained, they had already succeeded in stopping a royal departure and launching an investigation that would reach into the heart of the British establishment. The implications were staggering, and James knew that none of them truly understood what they had stumbled into. The investigation that followed would later be described by senior intelligence officials as the most delicate operation they had ever conducted. Over the next 48 hours, as Camilla remained in secure accommodations at a government safe house, teams of specialists worked around the clock to unravel what appeared to be a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of British society. Sergeant James Mitchell found himself at the center of an investigation that seemed to grow more complex with each passing hour. The journal, when fully analyzed, revealed a sophisticated intelligence operation that had been using access to royal social events to gather information about government policy decisions, military deployments, and diplomatic negotiations. The handwriting analysis is conclusive. Detective Chief Inspector Ashworth briefed the assembled team on the second day. None of the entries were written by the Queen Consort. They appear to be the work of at least 3 different individuals, all of whom had detailed knowledge of her schedule and social engagements. Miss Crawford, who James had learned was actually Deputy Director Sarah Mitchell from MI5, spread a series of photographs across the conference table. "We've identified several attendees at the private gatherings mentioned in the journal. Some are prominent business people with interests that could be significantly impacted by advanced knowledge of government decisions. Others appear to be foreign nationals with connections to intelligence services." James studied the photographs with growing unease. He recognized several faces from royal protection briefings, people who had been flagged as requiring discreet monitoring during their interactions with the royal family. The fact that they had been attending private social events suggested a security failure of unprecedented scope. How long has this been going on? Commander Patricia Hayes asked the question everyone was thinking. Based on the journal entries, at least 18 months, Crawford replied. Possibly longer. This appears to have been a long-term intelligence-gathering operation using the Queen Consort's social circle as cover. The implications were staggering. For nearly 2 years, hostile intelligence services had potentially been using royal social events to gather classified information about British government operations. The damage to national security could be immeasurable. But the most disturbing revelation was yet to come. We've identified the source of the leak, Crawford announced, her expression grim. Someone within the royal household has been providing detailed information about the Queen Consort's private schedule, guest lists, and even conversation topics to external parties. James felt his blood run cold. The royal household was supposed to be absolutely secure. Staffed by people whose loyalty had been tested and verified through the most rigorous background checks in the British government. The idea that there was a traitor operating at that level was almost unthinkable. Who? Hayes asked simply. Crawford hesitated for a moment, as if saying the name out loud would make it more real. Margaret Thornton, the Queen Consort's lady-in-waiting. The silence in the room was deafening. James had worked with Margaret Thornton for over 5 years. She had seemed like the perfect royal aide. Discreet, efficient, absolutely loyal to the crown. The idea that she had been operating as a foreign agent was almost impossible to process. She's been arrested, Crawford continued. My 5 took her into custody this morning. Initial interrogation suggests she was recruited approximately 2 years ago through a combination of financial pressure and blackmail. James found himself thinking back through every interaction he had witnessed between Margaret and Camilla. Every private moment where sensitive information might have been shared. The scope of potential intelligence compromise was enormous. The journal and photographs were her insurance policy, Crawford explained. She planted them in the Queen Consort's luggage as a way to ensure that if she was ever discovered, she could claim she was merely following orders from someone higher up the chain. She was planning to reveal their existence once the Queen Consort was safely out of the country, creating maximum embarrassment for the royal family while protecting herself from prosecution. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but they formed a picture that was almost too disturbing to contemplate. Margaret Thornton had been systematically betraying the trust placed in her, using her access to Camilla to gather intelligence for hostile foreign powers. The only reason she had been caught was a routine security inspection that had revealed her contingency plan. What about the Queen Consort? Hayes asked. What's her status? She's been cleared of any wrongdoing, Crawford replied. All evidence indicates she was completely unaware of the operation. She was, in effect, an unwitting asset, being exploited by someone she trusted completely. James felt relief wash over him. Throughout the investigation, he had found himself believing in Camilla's innocence, but having it officially confirmed lifted a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying. But Crawford wasn't finished. However, there are wider implications we need to address. The intelligence gathered through this operation appears to have been shared with at least 3 different foreign intelligence services. We're looking at a counterintelligence failure of the highest order. Over the following hours, as more details emerged from Margaret Thornton's interrogation, the full scope of the operation became clear. She had been recruited during a period of financial difficulty, initially asked only to provide minor details about royal social events. Over time, the requests had become more specific, more dangerous, until she was essentially running a full-scale intelligence operation from within the heart of the royal household. The information she had provided included advance notice of government policy announcements, details of military exercises, and insights into diplomatic negotiations that could have been used by hostile nations to gain significant advantages over British interests. The damage assessment will take months, Crawford briefed the team as the investigation began to wind down. But preliminary analysis suggests this may be one of the most significant intelligence breaches in recent history. James found himself wondering how many other Margaret Thorntons might be operating within the British establishment. If someone with her level of access and apparent loyalty could be turned, who else might be compromised? The answer came during the final briefing, 3 days after the initial luggage inspection. "We've identified a network," Crawford announced. "Margaret Thornton wasn't operating alone. We believe there are at least 6 other individuals in positions of trust who have been recruited by the same intelligence operation." The room buzzed with tension as Crawford continued. "This appears to be a long-term strategic operation designed to penetrate the highest levels of British society. They've been recruiting people with access to government officials, military leaders, and yes, the royal family." James thought about the implications. If hostile intelligence services had succeeded in placing agents throughout the British establishment, the damage to national security could take years to fully understand and repair. "What happens now?" Hayes asked. "We continue the investigation," Crawford replied. "Margaret Thornton has agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. She's providing us with details about her handlers, her training, and the other members of the network." But for James, the most important question was different. What about royal security protocols? How do we prevent this from happening again? Crawford's expression was grim. "Every member of the royal household will undergo enhanced background checks. We're implementing new surveillance measures, new communication protocols, and new procedures for monitoring social interactions involving the royal family." The changes would be significant. The informal, trusting atmosphere that had characterized royal household operations for decades would be replaced by something more suspicious, more controlled. It was a necessary evolution, but it represented the end of an era. As James prepared to brief his team on the new security measures, he reflected on how close they had come to a catastrophic intelligence disaster. If Margaret Thornton's luggage plant had succeeded, if Camilla had left the country carrying evidence of the intelligence operation, the resulting scandal could have brought down the government and severely damaged the monarchy. Instead, a routine security inspection had uncovered one of the most sophisticated intelligence operations ever attempted against the British Crown. The investigation would continue for months, but the immediate threat had been neutralized. 3 weeks later, as James stood guard during Camilla's rescheduled departure, he watched the new security procedures in action. Every bag was inspected with even greater scrutiny, every staff member monitored more closely, every social interaction documented and analyzed. Margaret Thornton had been sentenced to 25 years in prison for espionage. The other members of her network were being rolled up one by one, their recruitment and operations exposed through her cooperation with MI5. The intelligence operation had failed, but it had succeeded in changing the way royal security operated forever. Trust, once absolute, would now be verified and monitored continuously. As Camilla's aircraft finally took off for what was now a much-delayed diplomatic mission, James realized that his routine security inspection had prevented what could have been the greatest intelligence disaster in modern British history. Sometimes, he thought, the most important moments in national security came down to a single guard doing his job properly and trusting his instincts when something didn't feel right. The journal and photographs that had started it all were now sealed in MI5's most secure evidence vaults, their secrets fully exposed, but their potential for damage neutralized forever. The royal family could continue their duties, but they would do so under a level of security scrutiny that reflected the new reality of the threats they faced. For James, it was a reminder that vigilance never ends, and that sometimes the smallest details could be the key to protecting everything they had sworn to defend.